Sewer. You heard. Oh, yes, that's right. He died a few years ago, 6 years, 7 years.
Really?
Time flies. Maria Marshall, that's right. In case you didn't know.
Almost 8 years.
So anyway, she was a psychologist, and that's about all I have to recommend me for making this talk. I'm a regular guy. I was a maintenance man in a hospital, and but being the son of a psychologist, I think she was a pretty amazing person, and gave us some very good life plans, how to live a life without a lot of regret or problems. And so that's kind of what I'm here to talk about. But before I start going into what I do and what you all do to hold on to your head and keep the peace of Jesus alive. I'm going to sort of talk about where we are and why we got here. And it's not all the recent political developments, although they're not helping things out at all. If you go back many years, life was, you could say simpler, and you could say it was more complicated because your life was full of trying to find enough food to put in your mouth. And that, I think I took an online history class one time that pointed out that the food supply was basically fixed up until something like 1750 in that neck of the woods. And then agricultural technology took off. The food supply exploded, as did the population. When the population exploded, cities, which already existed, became much bigger, and life got more complicated. So aside from just bigger cities, and there was the community that existed in those days because of the lack of transportation caused everything to be quite simple. It was people, my grandmother told me, she was born in 1889, that everybody lived within a 2 or 3 mile radius, and you married somebody within that radius, and you lived in that radius your entire life, basically. People did move. She actually lived in Pittsburgh and DC. But she lived well into the 70s, was it? Something like that. So she was flying on jet airplanes by the time she died, right? And in our lifetime, on the other hand, things have really rapidly changed. We still have the village idea, as Hillary Clinton wrote about. It takes a village, right? And kids ran free, and it was simple. And if they caught me down the street robbing a nest or whatever, Mrs. Jones would grab my ear and take me home, and you knew, your mom knew, everybody found out what you were doing, and it was taken care of. Politics. So the lack of community that we seem to have developed in my lifetime is one of the big things that's turned into a problem. More on that in a minute. Politics has always been a problem. There was always the old line, don't talk politics or religion at the dinner table when you had guests. So that's always been a thing, but it's become very pointed lately. It's become extremely difficult for a number of reasons. These days, well, during that time, when I was roughly 10 years old, I guess, the Vietnam War. And we had a decade practically, not quite, after the civil rights movement was, came to pass, and the Voting Rights Act, there was a lot of, leftover animosity, I suppose. So we had racial riots, as well as, protests against the war, which gave us our first, that I know of, our first ability, it then became okay to call the government dirty names. It was the first time when we were, you went from pledging allegiance to the flag every morning to, the government is a horrible thing, right? That was me. Maybe not everybody did that, but, as a hippie in the sixties, that was a standard routine. You saw it in Forrest Gump where Jenny's boyfriend on the bus got into he didn't get into a fight. I think it was actually Forrest Gump that started the fight. But he was bad mouthing Johnson at the time. That was made okay at that point. And later on, of course, we had Nixon, and that just emphasized the thing. We went on with Reagan, Bush Sr., Clinton had his things. Bush Jr. had his issues, and it never has stopped. So it started a long time ago. It's not just a recent thing. Another thing that's happened is technology has had a heck of an effect. Computers came along, and with computers came in the beginnings, in the 90s, we had our first taste of social networks, which was pretty simple and pretty innocuous at that point. But fairly soon after that, the smartphone came, and that turned everything into separated people even farther. In the 90s also, it had become pretty much two people were required to maintain a family. That's when we really started having very many two worker families. And that caused some trouble. The fact that the children were then not taken care of as we were in the 50s really changed a lot of things. And
we call that the latchkey generation.
the latchkey generation, right?
They would let themselves in.
Right.
And give themselves in.
So anyway, after the smartphones, we got Facebook, and that to me is something of a horror story. I mean, it's okay to keep up with your family and that kind of thing, and I think that's what it was made for originally. Zuckerberg did the thing in Harvard at first, and it was so that people could maintain contact, but it seems to have turned into an arguing platform to a large extent. And with that arguing platform, the print media, the old world media has turned into something that really is agitating. I mean, that's their goal. They're trying to compete with Facebook these days to get the eyeballs on what's left of the print media. If you've looked at the journal lately, the Albuquerque Journal is about the size of a tissue paper. Doesn't have anything, And I noticed I looked at the opinion page the other day. The cartoon was a fourth of the opinion page. And the thing at the top that said what kind of opinions we published was another fourth of it. And then they had two things that were written by Albuquerque residents that were not professionally written, right? They were written. So, anyway,
But it
that's
still has Sudoku.
still has,
Sudoku,
Oh, so
yes.
that's its draw.
well.
you can get that on the internet.
If you're not interested in sports, it's almost not worth looking at. As far as I'm concerned. And I'm not, so, there you go. I didn't even know who was in the Super Bowl until the day of the Super Bowl, quite frankly.
But however, like the Wall Street Journal, New York Times,
Right, they're
still the same.
yeah.
They got it.
Well, I subscribe, personally, I subscribe to the Washington Post and the Wall Street, not the Wall Street Journal, but the New York Times. And, I almost don't read the Times. I just can't deal with it anymore. And I do the World, you know, that's what I get the Times for. So,
14 hours a month.
and that's one thing we need to do to keep this thing working, right? Do your work. But, so hearing all of that and, you know, on here, I also have a little line about political tribalism. It's gotten ridiculous. And I think that started with Reagan, basically, during the Reagan administration, not with Reagan, but talk radio started then, and that was, the beginning of the end, as far as I can see. So, and I listened to it at that time.
Dobson, focus on the family.
Yeah, well, yeah, it wasn't at the beginning, but, Rush Limbaugh came along, and that, you know, he even said personally that, I'm in the entertainment business, I'm not here to, make opinions or turn this off. And we haven't talked here. So given where we've come, what do I do about it? I'm gonna state what I do about it. You know, these times I've never seen difficult times like this before, where people are so adversarial and, you know, and refuse. I mean, there's always been differences of opinion politically. And people don't necessarily change their minds, but they were willing to talk to each other at least, and that just doesn't happen anymore. So what do I do? I mean, and with the fear of preaching to the choir here, I'm gonna say my first line of defense is, and you all know this, go to church. And really, that is the community that I believe is really being lost. That's one very good place to find it. Plus, aside from just meeting here as people and practicing Christianity, you probably heard me say that before. I've told it to Matthew a few times, where you come to church and you're nicer than you ever are at any other time of the week. And that's a good thing. And another thing, Lane asked me how I was doing, and I told him super duper. And you know, that's most of the time, it's a bit of an exaggeration, although it's a good thing to say. I mean, it's just pretend like you're doing good and smile, and it makes you feel better, right? So do that. That's another thing. But besides just going to the church and having a social situation, we also listen to well, you're listening to me today, and I'm sorry, it's not fully what Matthew could do and what he does weekly. Because, we do get our morality, we learn about the teachings of Christ, and that fellow was a very good psychologist, in my opinion. He really knows he knows, I guess, how to keep your head on straight, it's, the ideas of loving each other. The whole idea of the golden rule, that's basically an extension of that. And the forgiveness thing, both for yourself to believe that you're forgiven for what you do wrong, because I don't know about the rest of you, I'm not gonna put you in my bucket, but I do things wrong quite a lot, and the fact that you are forgiven, and it teaches you to forgive other people as well. So, and those things right there are the best way to keep your head above water, right? It really does. And the other thing is it's a weekly habit of thinking about where you're going, what you're doing, and why you're doing it, and that's important. That's really important. I mean, that keeps you going. It also encourages the whole church idea of a prayer life. That's an important thing as well, to take a minute every day, take more than a minute, all day long, you can have little 8-second prayers, but it's also good to take a few minutes, maybe in the evening, kneel down at your bedside. I don't do that anymore, but I actually saw
Well, we grew up saying if I die before I wake,
yeah.
I pray the Lord my soul to take.
Right.
They changed it now. It's keep me safely through the night and wake me with the morning light. That's what they say now.
That's
For children, the correct better.
And I grew up with the second one, but that first one.
To a large extent, I mean, a lot of people say you're talking to God, but you're also talking to yourself, that's really the big deal.
Well, it's God in us.
That's right. It's the Holy Stranger in a strange land used to say, thou art God, right? That's how they greet each other, so.
The purpose of prayer should be like to align your heart with God's will.
Right.
A lot of times I think
Right.
when we go to God, it's like, you ever call your child and they're like, hey, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening, all right, see you later, and they hang up on you. So be sure to send like money for Christmas, see you later. I'm like,
How old are you?
sometimes I think I could be like that with God with prayers. It's like, hey God, you're awesome. Also, I'd like this thing and this thing and this thing.
Yeah.
So I get my prayer. Like, oh, I didn't actually.
Won't you buy me?
Yeah.
We're saved.
May your will be done.
Yes.
At the end of every.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
That's,
You're-
Philippians, I think it's chapter 4 or 6, but it's like and don't be anxious about anything, but in all things the supplication and prayer with thanksgiving, submit your request to God. And I think I do a really good job of submitting my request to God, but I gotta remember also, it's like trying to align my heart with God. And I don't think I do enough prayer to him, not only just giving him my anxieties, but asking him to like change my heart for his will as well. And that's the hardest part of the prayer, but easy to forget.
Well, it is, if the prayer habit, the prayer life.
Yeah.
Reminds you on a regular basis, again, just like coming to church on that weekly basis, that it's a reminder. And it also, it has a tendency, I was about to say that I just went to an Oasis class on iconography.
Wow.
It was at a Greek Orthodox church, Father Sutter, who, and he explained all the rules and the color, the meanings of the different colors and so on and so forth. And they encourage, they encourage people to get an icon or two, you know, as many, put your crucifix up and make a prayer corner in your house. And the definite impression I had, and I had to leave and go do a job after this thing was over, but I kind of wanted to talk to him and ask him if it's really an intense prayer kind of a situation, almost an Eastern meditation kind of thing, where you know, where you come out of reality, you leave reality behind and go into this prayer state, you know, which we do to some extent. There's a book written on that I never read. It's about the equality between the Eastern meditation and Western religion. It's both, all of it. But,
Meditation can do that to a point, meditation and breath prayer, I mean, not as deeply, I'm sure, as they go, but
meditation and.
breath prayer.
Breath prayer,
Okay,
where you just
right.
breathe, that
Well,
helps,
that's
that helps my
why
anxiety.
I started
We
practicing.
learned how to paint dog.
Some sort of Eastern, I never took a coach or a lesson or anything like that, which a lot of people do. But I did, in the hippie days, again, get into that Eastern business when the Beatles were going off to India and so on and so forth. And I did manage to, and I still do it, and it's kind of like, just separating yourself from reality. You get into what you feel and what happens within you, and the ultimate mindfulness of just knowing what's happening with your body and your brain. You do still think, or I do still. Maybe some people can manage to turn off their brain, but I don't think it's possible, quite frankly. And
In fact, in meditation, you don't do that. What you do is just the thoughts come in and they just go
right,
like a stream. Or whatever.
right, let it go, right. Realize that it happens and that's okay. Yeah. And all of that stuff. Sometimes your breathing gets out of sync, and that's okay too. That's all okay. I had a problem in the beginning with swallowing it. It bothered me to take me out of the zone or whatever. So anyway, that's kind of a thing that works for me to reset things, you know, if you go in feeling a little agitated or anxious or whatever, you can do that for 5 or 10 minutes maybe, and it just sort of.
But my question then is, in this day and time, if our generation questioned the government because of Vietnam, it seems like younger people now are questioning the institution of the church because it seems so, heresy, not sincere.
Right,
So
well,
how
quite
do
frankly,
we
I
embrace-
question the institution of the church quite a bit myself. I mean, I have come to the conclusion that Jesus had one idea, and he walked around, preached, and talked to people and taught people. And what we see as the church today is what all these theologians, you know, the Arians lost in the battle that they had back in 200 or 300 AD, and various other groups, all kinds of different groups, and of course, Martin Luther went out against the Catholic Church, right? And then, well, there've been all kinds of fights, and basically what we're left with today is all these ideas that all these people, which, and you can say, just in the way that we said, thou art God a minute ago, you know, that they were divinely inspired, but who's to say, you know? we end up with, reading the Nicene Creed every week, and, there are things I read that, you know, just don't really sit all that well with me, so.
Frank admitted he crosses his fingers when he says parts of it agrees.
So, as I said, go to church.
In response to Deb's question, I think it's important to engage with younger people and see what they're looking for.
Right.
I mean, our church, we need those young people and we have them, you know, like talk to them and see what. I know the young people that I know want a church that are standing up for the oppressed, so that's really what my kids are looking for and my nephews and nieces, you know,
Yeah.
so.
I think, if I may speak, I think one of the things that a lot of people, the culture seems to be going a lot back towards like a Christian thing. A lot of people are turning towards church. A lot of things that I see, especially in our society, is people long for tradition. The America's kind of like lost its cultural backbone, and there's a lot of people that are going to, even like for me, who was non-denominational, went to a like pretty Baptist theology church. And when I started reading more than just my Bible, like church history, I wanted something that had more like tenured history, something that's been around since 1500 and way back. And especially amongst men, they want something that gives them substance. I think a lot of people are going to Christ, especially because Christ offers them substance. But more than tradition and culture and moral law, I think people need Christ. And that's something that's missing a lot in culture. There's a saying that one of the best arguments for God is that there's a God-shaped heart, a God-shaped hole in everyone's heart that nothing on earth can fill. And the church can do a wonderful job of giving people moral law and tradition and things like that. But if the church is only telling what the culture is already saying, that's where a church dies, which I think is respectfully what might be happening to our church. And if you preach the Bible, but you don't preach Christ, you're going to lose the most important substance.
I think you need to do more than preach Christ.
Absolutely,
You need to
yes,
see Christ.
yes,
And
absolutely,
that's where we're losing out.
absolutely.
There you go.
I mean, you could preach it till you're purple,
Yeah.
but if you're not doing it,
Right,
Yes.
exactly.
Yes.
you're in trouble.
Wrong.
The classic,
Try.
classic argument, faith
There's no
or
way I
work?
could do it. Right, that's not wrong.
What's the classic argument?
What, faith or work?
Oh, favorite
The
words.
classic argument.
Yeah, or you say favorite words.
That goes back to why the earlier, I can't remember, you mentioned it or someone else, but like, why are people kind of like turning away from the church and not trusting the church? Oh, his dad had said that. Why are people like not trusting the institution of the church anymore? And I think it could be from like the Enlightenment, just like people kind of not trusting the church to give them spiritual truths anymore. And also because of people might be preaching Christ, but they're not doing a good job of exalting Christ in their lives and being a good example. And they see us as very the word that's tossed around is hypocrite. Now, of course, we're hypocrites because we're sinful. If we were perfect at following the Bible, it would have been us that would have been on that cross. But it's what we are. Yeah,
I think as institutions are suspect.
Yes.
And I think that is a result of the population growth. I think the population growth is not only the population growth. I started by saying everybody lived within a 3-mile radius.
Right.
And now you can get on an airplane and, we have many Muslims, we have a multicultural world. New Mexico has always been multicultural, but it's even more so these days. And that causes all kinds of conflicts. I mean, when I was in Hong Kong, there were, I learned that they think considerably differently. Their day-by-day life and behaviors are different than Americans. I mean, and sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes it's a bad thing, especially from an American perspective. So the institutions excuse me, the institutions, that are in America don't work in China, for instance, and the same thing is happening here, I think, where we get a lot of conflict and it's not terrible conflict, and we can get through it, you know, and I think we're gonna have to get through it, because the transportation is there, and people are gonna move to where their lives will be best, you know, that's what's gonna happen. So. I don't know,
Even
the ins-
Jesus migrated.
Yeah.
Even Jesus
Right.
was an.
Well, particularly Paul.
Traveling in, yeah.
That's true.
So,
Because of
Talk
so
about
much
the-
new roads.
God change folks, right? I mean, if you look at it, politics fills that hole for a lot of people nowadays.
Right.
Yeah.
It becomes their religion. Right? I go around saying, oh, politics is your religion. People have to come to worship their political.
That's great that you say that.
They're trying to
Yeah.
fill it and it doesn't fill them, and so they're frustrated and they're angry, and so that leads to a lot of violence. And
That's
common.
true. That's so good that you bring that up. That's
Yeah.
good. I think if I may piggyback off of your really good point, I think everyone has a worldview that kind of explains the world and there's a lens for how they look through it. And generally, a Christian worldview, your worldview has to answer 4 questions. And then the 4 questions would be, how did we get here? Who am I? What's wrong with the world? How do we fix it? And generally, Christianity, the worldview for Christianity would be, who am I? I'm a child of God in the crowning of creation. How did I get here? Through God's providence and creation of the world. What's wrong with the world? Me and my sin. And how do we fix it? Jesus Christ. And when you take away that, you have to come up with a lot of different answers, and your politics becomes your answer for what's wrong with the world and how you fix it. And politics has become kind of a religion for people, and that's.
That's really insightful. I love those questions because of the way the world is now.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But Bruce, do you offer us hope?
Yeah. Some hope.
well, on fixing yourself, that's the whole idea, and it is, because, if we all fixed ourselves, there's a protest I heard of recently that the Quakers are proposing, which is to not buy anything, not use money on the 28th of February. And,
I've heard
don't,
every Friday after that as well.
well, it could be, it does state in the thing I got that, if they don't listen, parenthetically, and they won't, we'll make a longer one later, so, and I don't know, I haven't heard the every Friday after. But, you know, if enough people buy into it, that'll make a big deal, you know, that'll get some people's attention, but it has to be everybody buying into it. And it's the same thing with fixing yourself. If you do fix yourself, then the world gets fixed, right? I mean, all of these human problems that we seem to have are gonna slowly melt away, or at least reduce.
What's concerning me right now is Christ spoke truth to power, the Roman Empire, and look what happened to it.
Right?
And it's funny, but Mary and I were joking because we're raging against the dying of the light on Facebook, and so we're gonna share food when we get in our little Democrat Nazi camp. And it's tongue in cheek, but it's dead serious, you know, and that's what I want to feel mental relief from.
I'm speaking about social media, I feel like I kind of disengaged with it, because it was really causing a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
So that's one way that I've tried to, is like work on my mental health. And I think, I don't know if you guys agree with this, but I feel like when people rant on social media, at least when I did, I felt like I did my due diligence and I was done.
You felt like,
I did my due diligence. I
Oh.
feel like that, you know, posting articles, we feel like we're doing our part, at least And I don't think that's working, you know, so how, and
It's
this
very
is
temporary.
different from- But you know, as far as my mental health goes, how can I engage in a different way to feel like I'm helping, you
I
know?
get so sick of people, thoughts and prayers.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
having
so
thoughts
I
and
just
prayers.
don't
I
think
have
it's.
My friend from the army is dying because the NIH got shut down and he's in clinical trials to stay alive, you know?
What did you say?
A friend of mine from retired army is staying alive because of clinical trials at NIH. He's covered with tumors. They're military and he's got to get, and look what they're doing to the veterans and it just. I don't know, it's insane. I feel like I'm in a parallel universe.
I didn't hear the very first thing you said though.
Yeah, when you were doing this.
Instructor.
Getting tired of people not making change and instead just like sitting a thought and praying.
Oh,
and it
thoughts
gets
and
there.
prayers.
Yes.
Sending you thoughts and prayers. Well, I want it to stop. I don't want thoughts and prayers. I don't think Jesus said, oh, you're bleeding for your whole life. Well, I'll give you thoughts and prayers and then leave. It's not what Jesus did. He didn't contritely say thoughts and prayers. I'm so sick of that. It requires action. It requires turning the tables over in the temple.
And here's one thing that I will say, he would, speak with the Samaritan woman, right?
Right.
He would meet with the tax collector, right? And discuss things with him. And that's a thing that's really missing today, where. And I hate to bring it up here because the left wing won't talk to the right wing either, you know, it goes both directions. And if I do believe there are some good things that they're talking about. The border was a stinking mess. I mean, it has been a mess and it needed to be cleaned up. It doesn't need to be closed, but it needs to be rationally dealt with. right?
How is it a mess?
With too many people coming and dying on the.
Well, it's because there weren't enough judges to take on their cases. You needed judges. There was a huge
Right,
queue.
right. The 7-year wait for adjudication for the somewhat crazy idea that everybody gets amnesty, right? Amnesty was the way in and
Amnesty?
yeah,
Did you mean asylum? or-
asylum.
Um,
Yeah, for every, I don't know what the percentages were, but as I understand it, the percentages were very high for people claiming asylum. And the numbers at the border, you know, at various different times, and there were marches that came to the border. I've heard up to 30,000 people a week, a day, I'm not sure, but it couldn't go on at that rate for forever.
Well, actually, if you want to look at immigration, it's a whole different subject that is worthy of.
Yeah, lots of,
For
lots of
example,
work.
probably everybody in this room has ancestors that immigrated to this country. And often there were no rules, they just came.
Right,
There were impositions at different times, like in 1883, there was the Chinese Exclusion Act.
right,
Mhm.
Even though the Chinese had helped build the railroads, we wanted to exclude them.
right.
1921, we passed laws that said, we'll let people in proportion to the number of people from that country that are already in the United States as of 1910. And then in 1924, they changed the rule to make it as of 1890, because they wanted to exclude people from Southern and Eastern Europe.
the Japanese, internment, there are many.
And so with the asylum, people have been very involved with. A lot of people see the asylum had really valid reasons for doing so. And there weren't innumerable, I mean, the propaganda about criminals at the border is totally bogus,
Stupid.
Right,
totally bogus.
right. It's
And
probably,
so I think it's really important when immigration comes up to try to be as factual as possible. And in fact, over the last 4 years, the amount of people coming to the country has decreased significantly. And another fact is that most of the immigrants who do come work, obey the law, and aren't criminals.
That is correct. I'm not.
but I will tell you one thing that
Make sure.
does, we need to look at is our deficit. We often tell our daughter, unless you're the US government, you can't spend more than you make.
Yeah.
We say that tongue in cheek, but while they're going about it, it's nuts.
That's a good Presbyterian attitude.
Yeah, Scottish Presbyterian.
On a personal level, I have a lot of clients who have anxiety over the world today. And I do other things for them, but one thing I insist on from them is to do at least one kind thing every day. And bring a list with them for the next appointment. It gets them off of themselves and doing something constructive that is good.
Wow,
That's
that's very wise.
let me buzz through this list. I've got the standard list that you've all heard about, which is, get your exercise. Okay, that's, that's important. Your body, your brain, it works all together and do that. Maintain your social contacts. Here we are talking to each other. That's a good thing. Along these lines, work, hobbies, volunteering. I work myself and I hardly make any money. I do make some money. I make maybe $10,000 a year on something like that, on that work. But to a large extent, I do handyman work and I go out and to a large extent, people even older than I am. And I'll fix a faucet or put in an electrical outlet and it's, I can't tell you how many people are just very appreciative to have that, to have the ability to get these things done, and it's also good for me in that it is more social activity. That gets me out of bed in the morning and I go out and meet these people and do that stuff. And of course, exercise your brain, do the world.
Sudoku, I like Sudoku.
Read some history, read whatever and get a good night's sleep. And in general, just stay healthy, eat right and talk to the doctor.
I had a therapist put me on a news diet.
The news diet?
Yes, she said, "You're going on a news diet."
That's important, learn to turn, because news does, I do a lot of reading, half an article. And it'll evolve into, and I'll stop at that. And I go on strikes sometimes too, so.
Bruce, I'd like to share 2 incidences that happened one day for me, just because it's kind of pertinent to this, in my opinion. I was driving down the street and I had a blowout, and then I called my son and I said, "What should I do? I think the tire went blew out, but it didn't fall over the car." He goes, "Stop somewhere, park, and put your tires." I went, "Oh, yeah." I was very tired that day, so I went and I stopped, and these people had seen the tire blow, saw me doing whatever. And then they went around, came back and parked on the side of me. And they were both somewhat disabled because they had those crutches that hold on to them. Okay, and so they were in their nice clothes. And the gentleman, I would say 60, he took the tire off and put mascara on and did all that stuff. And I said, they were like angels, because I was kind of agitated, because I was, and the wife, she was, I could tell, see her disability, she just stood there and was talking about it, and so I thought, well, I guess he doesn't need my help, so I can't really lift the tire out and all that stuff. So I was so grateful, and then I cleaned his hands for him with my stuff, that antiseptic stuff, and it was like, and he had some good clothes on, and he still did it, but he said he'd get himself clean. Okay, so they drove off. And I thanked them and I did all that stuff. Okay, now I'm at the post office. And I went and I got my mail and I saw this gentleman, I'm gonna say about 60, but I could just feel his anger. And I didn't want to get in front of him to leave the post office because I felt like, I don't know, it was just uncomfortable. So I was subservient and I let him get in front of me. And he walked out. And he let the door slam on me, the two doors. I mean, not that I expected him to hold it for me, that's okay. But they slammed and I thought, that was rude. He has a lot of anger. Two people, I mean, it would have been easy just to hold the door a little bit or just don't hold it, but push it open wide, but he didn't push it open wide. He just opened it a little bit so he could get out. That's, it's just the nation, you know, goodness. I don't want to call it evil, but that wasn't very nice, disability. So it's kind of sad to see that happening, but it's.
And the other question, or the other comment, is who felt how at the end of
Yeah,
those,
like-
you know, at the end of those situations?
Well, what is it who is it you always quote, John?
And it
When they
does, I
truly
mean, you feel
knows
good helping people.
happiness.
It's a good thing.
Oh, a priest at Notre Dame on happiness, and what was his quote?
He said the wise man knows that the only way he can truly help himself is by helping others.
And who was this?
Well, I got a book one time on the meaning of life, and they quoted people who have thought about this a lot, and he's a priest at Notre Dame, and in those days he was, that's a long time ago, but it was interesting, the opinions that people voiced about why we're here and what we should be doing. And that was what he said. And the only way to truly help yourself is by helping others. It's always stuck with me.
As always, our highest authority should be the Bible and what we look to do and how to live as Christians. And as I was trying to figure out the answer to this, I was really struggling because I couldn't quite think of what I wanted to say. And I knew from the beginning, as all of you have made great points, that we need to take care of others. How do we do that? You know, in Matthew 5, it says that you are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and be trampled upon by others' feet. You are the light of the world, a city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp, put it under a basket, but on the stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they can see your good works and give glory to God. I think one of the beautiful things about our church, especially PCUSA, is that PCUSA has been around for years and years and years, going back generations. And not only just our church with generational wealth and hundreds of years of saints contributing to it, but also the web that we have across the country. I think one of the best ways to help other people is by having a strong church that can afford to give help to other people and have institutions set up in colleges and hospitals like the one across the street. So strong churches. Yeah. So like in Acts chapter 2, starting verse 44, it says that and all who believed were together and had all things in common, and they were selling their possessions and belonging and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. And day by day, attending the people together and breaking bread at homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved. So like a lot of our strongest institutions in the West, hospitals, schools, and churches were all established because of the church. And our institutions through the church is very important to help people. But I think it should also be very personable too. You can tithe to church every day and go every day and have communion with the other saints. But we should remember to like help those that are outside as well, where it talks about like we who are strong in Romans 15, we who are strong have an obligation to bear with the failings of the weak and not to please ourselves. Let each of us please his neighbor for his good to build him up. For Christ did not please himself, but as it is written, the reproaches of those who were reproached, you fell on me. We need to remember to make things personable in our way that we help other people. But we are very blessed to have such a strong church and community that we can use through proceeds and generational building up and saints, and to make jobs for people, for other people. And I think that's why PCUSA is God's gift to earth. So,
Well, the Baptists feel that way too.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah.
Well, our church government was formed, our founding fathers of this nation.
Yes,
Many were Presbyterian and
Yes.
said we want a representative form of government.
yeah,
And it's modeled after them.
yeah,
But go to Princeton sometime, you'll see it.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Does our church still have a lot of ties to the hospital across the street? Do we do much with them?
I think they're pretty much separate these
They
days.
sort of call
There are
them-
Presbyterian churches, Presbyterian hospitals
Hospitals, yeah.
all over the place, and they pretty much run independently.
But they were started by the church.
Right, right.
Yes.
Just like the senior home of Edagana was started by Presbyterian, Episcopal, Lutheran, and Methodist. I think.
That's owned by a corporation in Oregon.
Now it's incorporated. But yeah, we started. Well, the fact was, as missionaries came in, they thought, you know, how do we preach to them if they don't have food and shelter and
Yeah.
education?
But in all schools and other,
Yeah.
Well, the family promise that's supported by the living.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
by a whole bunch of churches. Right.
In the Manal School.
But this east-west, I love, when I was taking classes at St. Norbert, I love what Pope Francis said about faith and works. He said that, that faith without, works is, well, let's see, how did he put it? He said that, faith without reason is superstition. But reason without faith is idolatry. And I had to think about that long and hard. Because I thought that's pretty wise. I thought, well, what are our idols? Because we tend to be existential rather than mystic. The Easterners are mystic and we're more existential. We're more head than heart. I had a Baptist cousin say, good Lord, I walk into your sanctuary and it looks like a courtroom. And I went, well. Welcome to the Presbyterian Church.
No, there is a reason for that. I actually had a course on that.
Oh,
Yeah.
why we look like a courtroom?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, it goes way back. It goes way, way, way back. It's this transition that the Christian church had to go from homes to some type of facility.
right.
And what they duplicated was the Roman court.
Oh, okay, so there's a reason.
Yeah.
But what I thought about is like, okay, we tend to be more existential, you know, more reason. What are our idols? I thought, our idols are the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Our idols are university academics and Presbyterian health research, and you know, we can have some our banks, our institutionalized bank. We have a lot of idols.
Okay, you wanna wrap it up? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's about where we do need that.
Interesting.
It's a tough time. It is a tough time. And you need to take care of yourself. And I think, you know, Jesus was was very much in favor of that, doing your part to make it better, however you see it, you know? And it's pretty easy, he had a pretty clear idea of how he saw it.
That's what I like to call the way. It's called the way.
in a way.
Well, thank you, Bruce.
Thank you for coming.
Okay. I gotta go home with Carol to find out what the schedule is for next
I'm
week.
next week,
Huh?
I'm next week,
You are? Okay, so I'll be bugging you.
yeah, so I'll bring that,
And then on
can I bring a
the,
thumb drive to you?
on the 9th is Crossroads.
Putting religion in